This is my story. So as a Christian, I've been blessed to be a Christian my entire life, but to be a true Christ follower, I would say it's only been these past few years. As a kid, I grew up as an innocent boy seeing my parents worship God, but I didn't really understand what that meant until just a few years ago. And it took a lot of steps to get there. It was at the age of 3 that I got baptized, but I still didn't know what it meant, especially at the time. I barely remember it. And then at 7 years old, that's when I got involved with kids ministry. But did I really know what I was praising? Not really. It really wasn't until the age of 12 that I actually made the choice for myself to follow Christ. I went to a camp in Washington just about 7 years from now. It's pretty crazy if you think about it. And it was there that I really made the choice to follow Christ. And that was huge for me, because when I made that decision, it actually felt real to me and what it means to follow Christ. And so ever since that day, I've been making an effort to pray to God every single day. But that was my first camp, and when you go on camp, there's something called a camp high, and you feel really on fire for a couple weeks. But after that, I started battling depression, and it wasn't very easy for me. And throughout middle school, I started lacking my studies, maybe played a little too many video games, and I started struggling in that department of my life. And it wasn't until about freshman year that I went to a Christian school and my whole life changed. It was in my freshman year I moved from Washington to California, and the reasoning behind that is because my dad, I had just found out that he'd been struggling with cancer apparently for multiple years, but it wasn't until after my camp, shortly after, that I moved from Washington to California, found out he had cancer, and was entering my freshman year into high school. And in the last few months of that, first few months of moving to California, he passed away from stage 4 prostate cancer. And while my whole entire family was crying, I was a mess, but I didn't really know what to do with myself. I was in denial, and in the moment I couldn't even cry because I'd cried out all my tears already, and I didn't know why God was doing this and what his purpose for this was. And I could have easily walked away from the faith, really easily. Like a lot of people, they turn to drugs or they turn to something that's could take them down a whole life path of just destruction. But thankfully my way of doing it was video games, which is a whole lot better than drugs, but still was a major part of my struggle as a Christian and my depression. And it wasn't until maybe a couple years later that things started looking up a bit. And it wasn't until after my dad passed away, a couple years later, after living in my grandma's home and going to Christian school for a couple years, that I moved into a widow's home. And that was a lot of girls I lived with, but it was literally only 10 feet away from my church. And there I met a lot of my lifetime friends I still have today. And it was there that I started to experience the love of Christ and what it really looks like to be a Christ follower, and how to still follow Christ amidst your struggle, amidst your temptation, amidst your sin, whatever it may be. And it was there I finally realized why God had done that to me with my dad, because the end of my dad's journey was just the beginning of mine. So shortly after that, I finally discovered my calling, and it's pretty amazing because a lot of people don't discover their calling and purpose till many years down the line. Some even until they're retired or they're nearly done with their life, and they regret what they've done because they didn't even realize their purpose. And it was a few mission trips I went on that actually revealed my calling and God's calling on my life. I went to Mexico for a few days in December 2017, Brazil in August 2018 for 10 days, and then I went to Costa Rica just for 5 weeks this last summer. That was completely life-changing, and it revealed my purpose, my ultimate calling, which is to become a missions pastor and reach those who have a similar testimony as me, similar pain and struggle as me, the fatherless, because they need to hear this message. And now I'm here at Jessup. So as I go into Jessup and study theology and minor in business, I'm finally figuring out where God wants me to be and the techniques that are going to propel me to my future to reach millions and maybe even billions, because there is certainly a problem in our world and people need to hear the message of Christ. So let this be a testimony to others. This has been my story so far.